Now I'm going to open the chat. There we go. So I'm Margaret Carleton, and I helped organize an exhibit of a number of different artists and projects in Providence, Rhode Island. And I'm happy to welcome some of the most prolific and wonderful artists who are part of this show. So with that said, these women are all part of the Tiny Pricks project. They've contributed multiple pieces, done incredible work, and entrusted Craftland and me with them for this month, but they will be traveling all over the country. So hopefully you will get a chance to see them. But I would like to have you all, probably starting with Diana Weymar, who is the inspiration and shepherdess of this whole project and has made it all happen. If you could all introduce yourselves and just tell us where in the world you are, and maybe even show us what you're working on right now.
Sure. Well, I'm Diana Weymar, and I think, I hate to say this, so I think maybe Trump was the inspiration for this project, but it's a strange inspiration. I'm right now in Victoria, British Columbia. So I'm an American, but a permanent resident in Canada. So I'm not Googling move to Canada because I've already moved here. But I can also tell you that my, heart is very much in the United States and has been with this project since the beginning, been, the Trump presidency. So my parents are American. I have family in the States. And I can tell you that Canadians are feeling this presidency every bit as much as Americans, as are many other people around the world. And tomorrow morning I get on a plane to go to the East Coast, to New York. There's a show there as well as, and thank you so much, Margaret, for putting this show together so quickly. I think it was maybe a couple months ago, I was sitting on my front porch talking to you about whether or not we could do this at all, much less get so many artists together. And the other artists who were on this panel actually are, when Margaret and Heather said that the panel that had been in Boston wasn't completely up to date, and how could we get pieces that were current sent to Providence, I knew immediately that I could count on these participants to send them to you. And it's been really nice to watch the project grow in a way in which I'm actually not involved in that step. So one of the important things about Tiny Pricks is that it's a project within a project, and each one of these participants has a sort of project of their own within it, in which they're curating and cultivating and have their own language of protest. And their own identity and their own practice. And luckily we all come together. And I'm working on a piece when Trump mocked the reporter, the MSNBC reporter who was hit by a rubber bullet. So I'm tidying it up because you were asking me how I do them so quickly, and the answer is not very well. Become a bit of a stitch hack just to keep the daily doily, the daily feed going. And the participants on this panel have a very well-developed curatorial eye for their work, and I think spend more time on individual pieces. And every now and then I treat myself to working on a piece and more in depth, but I'm sure they'll talk more about their process. But mine is pretty rapid to keep up with the news, so that you're actually getting up-to-date information on the feed through thread and textile. Hi, Peggy.
Hi, how are you?
There she is.
I didn't get an actual invitation, so I'm not sure if I'm not on my computer. I'm on my phone, but okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought I sent it to everybody. But welcome.
If you send me one, that would be a lot easier. There we go. Let me see here. There we go.
Well, we can see and hear you.
You can see it. Okay. Hi.
Can you find the invite?
No, I didn't have it. Not in my email. I don't see it.
Let me just jump off for a second.
Maybe
Sorry.
Beth, do you want to introduce yourself and where
Sure.
you are?
My name is Beth Eltinge. I live in the Washington, D.C. area, and I'm not working on a piece, but I can show you my latest, which I haven't been prepared to post, and I think you'll understand why when I show you. This is for Ruth Bader Ginsburg. When they are 9 is when there will be enough women on the Supreme Court. And I have been so traumatized by the pushing through of a woman on the Supreme Court. It just did not feel like the right time to post this piece. So I'll post it later. But, so gosh, should I talk about how I got started with Tiny Pricks?
Yes, that would be great.
I have a friend, Maurice, lives in the Netherlands, and she has become a great photographer. And she told me it would be much easier for you to see my work if you got onto Instagram. And I said, well, what is Instagram? I have no ideas about it. So she kept telling me, get on Instagram and look at my photos. So I did. And she said, I can point you to a couple of other sites that might interest you. And included in that was Tiny Pricks. And I saw the work that was being posted there, and it just clicked. I said, this is perfect for me. I love this. I have always done needlework, made things. I decided in the last couple of years of my life, I just have to make things. And so I make things. And to make things with a purpose is very fulfilling. And so I have really enjoyed my participation with this group. And I thank you, Diana, for being so welcoming to everybody. I just feel like everybody can participate however they want to. And I think part of the appeal is the great variety of stitching that we see. It is all heartfelt and it is all wonderful. And so it's very exciting to see it all.
I'm just trying to manage. And Carol, would you like to talk about your involvement?
I was trying to remember when I first heard about the project, and I think I just came across some small mention on Facebook. I know most of the things are on Instagram, but I think that's where I first saw it. And I was already on Instagram, so I started to follow Diana and the project on there. And I guess if you ask my husband, he says it's become an obsession, but it's also become a lifeline, because on so many days when I'm watching too much CNN and too much bad news, it just gets me down so much. And this is something that lifts me up, gives me purpose, and also just the feeling of being part of this wonderful community of people who are encouraging one another. And when I first started, I hadn't done any embroidery in probably decades, except for one little thing I did for my granddaughter's school t-shirt. I embroidered flowers on that for her. But other than that, I really hadn't done much. And so when I first started, I felt like, oh, the quality of what I'm doing isn't that great. But then I could see that people were so encouraging that I just got hooked. And every time I think I'm done, he opens his mouth again. So
that's one thing we've been able to rely on, unfortunately.
Oh my gosh. But then Diana opened it up. I don't know, Diana, was it about 6 months ago that you said, let's do some inspirational things too to balance it out?
It was January.
When was it? January? Yeah.
January.
And that was a wonderful thing for me too, because it just was such a good feeling to not only focus on the my husband just gave me a note. He says, what are you going to do for the next 4 years? Well, it'll depend on.
We're all wondering that.
We'll see. But it's nice having the inspirational quotes to do too.
Yeah.
And, as I said, and I'm one of the people who submitted some things early on. Her name is Maria Wolf. And she's a wonderful artist. I don't think she's been doing tiny pricks lately, but she's doing a fabulous project. It's a traditional kimono, and she's been embroidering every week things during COVID. It's not finished, and she's donated to me a bunch of textiles. So that keeps me going too. And it's just, as I say, it's a lifeline. It's something to hang on to through the craziness.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Diana. Thank you. And Beth and Peggy, all these people that reach out and comment in such wonderful, supportive ways. And both of you, I have to say, the quality of your work has been inspiring me to push myself to do more.
Oh,
Thank you.
no, that's a great compliment. Thank you.
All pushed yourself. I mean, really taken embroidery to different levels.
Yeah.
It's so impressive.
Mm.
So what, in terms of time, how have you found the time? Some of you have spent hundreds of hours on these pieces.
Well,
And
for me, I've been going to sleep too late every night. That's
I get up too early in the morning.
I have a very dirty house.
well, some things can wait. This can't.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true.
And some pieces, to be frank, some pieces don't take all that long.
Right.
Some pieces do take a long time, but before I started doing so much tiny pricks, I did beadwork, and that takes a long time. I mean, I could easily work on a piece for a couple of weeks, and tiny pricks, sometimes I get them done in a day. Sometimes it takes 2 days. One piece took me about a week. The one that has if it has a lot of words on it, it takes longer. But that's one thing that's very satisfying about this work, is you can kind of knock them out in a day or two.
would you
And
like
that's
to
fun.
talk about the collar that you made, the beaded collar?
Uh-huh.
It's just such a gorgeous
And they're
piece.
showing it right now.
Yeah, thank you. Some of these pieces, they just come into my mind and they're just there, fully formed in a very short amount of time. And this was one of them.
How long did that one take?
That one, I'm a fast beater. And the necklace, well, it's not a full-size necklace. It's a relatively small piece.
Right.
And I did the beading in one day. It just flew right together. And then working on the black fabric was a little bit tough, because it's, just trying to draw on it or something. So I had to, another thing I love about these is each piece has its own unique problems that you get to work through and try to solve these problems. And to do that one, I used freezer paper and ironed that to the back of the piece. And then I drew a circle on that. And then I sewed with red, on my sewing machine, I sewed a red circle around. And that gave me the guidance of where I was going to place that beadwork. And then I could base the beadwork onto the piece. I used waste fabric when I made the letters, so that you can put it on and do the embroidery, and then you literally unweave the fabric from underneath the embroidery. So that's a way that you can do on dark fabric that you cannot write on. But that piece was inspired. I have a friend who was fortunate enough to interview the 4 women who were on the Supreme Court. Sandra Day O'Connor had retired at that time. And they were unveiling a new portrait in the portrait gallery. And so she got to interview these women. And she did such good work with it. And I said, I would love to make a necklace for Ruth Bader Ginsburg. That would really make me happy. And she said, if you make it, I can get it to her. And I never knew, how serious she actually was. And I got the design in my head. I even bought the beads, and I sat down to make this necklace. And I thought, I have no idea what size. I know she's a very, very small woman, but and it needs to be a little bit bigger because it needs to rest on the outside of her robe. And I just got hung up with that and never got the necklace made. And so with her passing, I was finally able to make a necklace for her.
That's a great story.
It is.
That's a beautiful piece. It's so delicate, but yet powerful. It's just gorgeous.
Thank you. And that one, it just came to my mind fully formed very quickly.
It's a really beautiful tribute.
Mhm.
So we love talking with Peggy. We had one Zoom with Peggy earlier about how the Tiny Pricks Project modernizes and makes relevant the centuries-old process of hand sewing and embroidery, juxtaposing embroidery, which is very slow and thoughtful, with tweets, which are an immediate and constant, is an interesting choice for activism and art. How does this process felt for you?
Me?
Peggy.
Oh, okay. Oh, it's felt, well, it's felt like a tremendous outlet. It's been a source of great relief and comfort, and just a way to get rid of a lot of stress. And I don't know, it's just the knowing that I'm doing something that's going to be part of this whole, this big project, is a fantastic feeling. And then, you know, and knowing that it's going to reach so many people, and so many people are going to see it and comment on it or whatever. I've never had that experience before, and it's been just this very enriching, and it's, you know, I just feel like it has kept me from going completely crazy with what's going on in the world. So I think it's, you know, it's a lifeline in a way.
Yes.
I think that the assumptions that we make about this medium have changed a lot. I picked it because it was practical. I have 4 children, and I can put a piece in a Ziploc bag and sit by the squash courts. And you can also, you know, use it aggressively. And depending on who makes the piece, that determines the context. So to me, it almost makes sort of a lot of sense to use this medium, because it's also so available. And it was really important to me, this is my 3rd public project, to make it accessible and to not make it something that just sort of, you know, traditionally white women of leisure could do. That anyone can do it, and anyone can do it easily, and you can learn. So despite the sort of elaborate, you know, nature of the medium, you can see that every single piece is amazing. It really is very generous, because you see the work that people have done. And in this particular case, you also know, especially when you're looking at this panel, that people have given a tremendous amount of their time and creative energy to the project. And that's the real gift. I don't think it would be the same if everyone kept their pieces.
Right.
You know, and that's sometimes confusing for artists who contact me and ask if I'll post their piece. And I explain that every single piece is donated to the project. And that's something I think that allows us to emerge from this quiet, kind of domestic, traditionally feminine medium into something that's real activism, which is a really sort of,
Can I just
powerful.
tag on to that for a second, Diana? So many of some of the pieces are fabrics we found at Etsy or somebody's yard or whatever, but some of our pieces were stitched onto pieces that were meaningful from our mothers, our grandmothers. And to think that if they were here today, they would be doing this stitching because they would want to be part of this. It makes it special to be able to use something that they made years ago and layer onto it this activist project that, you know, would mean a great deal to them. So.
Well, I think it breathes new life into some of these pieces too, because some of this work was done primarily for decoration and also to show off the skills of the embroiderer. It was done to be a little, and I've taken little hand towels and then written words on them. And I'm taking these hand towels that my children don't want. I mean, they were sitting in a box up in a closet, and now they're getting new life and they're being used again, and they're being repurposed. And I think that's wonderful. I really don't know how my family in the past would feel about me reusing their stuff the way I have been, but I feel like it's given it new life, another chance. I mean, it's letting it be seen. So that's great.
It's also so interesting to me, sort of bringing those things out of a private space and into a public space. And I think that this project is so good at that. And I don't know how many pieces Diana receives every day. It could be hundreds, I think, because the number just keeps going up. But I think that idea of sort of women making crafts and making sort of domestic products is really turned on its head when you bring them out into the open like this.
And there are men who submitted pieces too, right, Diana?
Right.
And Margaret?
Yeah, sure.
You,
Yes.
There
There are, but they are usually connected to a mother, girlfriend. They're connected. I mean, and also, to be honest, I don't know a lot about participants. You know, specifically, I don't ask their gender.
Right.
I'm not. That's not what this project is about. You know, you see personalities emerge, especially when you make a lot of pieces, so that the people on this, you know, the participants on this panel, you know, people probably know more about them than most participants, but some contribute anonymously. And I don't ask for any information that people don't want to provide, and I don't always post all the information that people provide. So, but I can tell you that when people come to the exhibit, the reaction is very similar. It doesn't sort of, the discussions that you have with men and with women and anyone who comes in can relate to the project. So I think it's obviously the medium and the accessibility and the traditions behind it. But I wanted to ask you, Peggy, because you work with fabric that you have a sort of canvas. That's your pieces are made on a canvas, and you know, I think it's interesting to see your pieces in contrast to the ones that are on vintage or, you know, repurposed textile, because they really speak the same language. You've created a kind of vintage textile within the project.
Yeah. Well, I just, as it happens, I just don't have a lot of vintage fabric in my, you know, in my possession. So, and when I did this, the project I was doing before Tiny Pricks, I was doing things on just whatever fabric I had in the house. But I've started buying actual unbleached, like reams of unbleached muslin. I mean, yards of unbleached muslin, and that's what I'm using now, because since I started, I've been a painter all my life, and I've always, you know, I've always drawn and I've always painted. What comes more naturally to me is to create my own, you know, basis for a piece, rather than using what's already there. If I had a collection of vintage fabrics, I'd probably do some, you know, work on those, but I just don't have any available, and I'm not going to any yard sales right now. So I'm just not finding any. So I mean, it's as simple as that. I just happen to have, you know, I can order some unbleached muslin from Amazon or something and have plenty of that around. So, but that's just more comfortable for me, is to start from absolute scratch and then make a drawing and transfer it to the muslin and then sew it.
I love your paintings. That's been an inspiration to me. I don't feel comfortable doing the paintings, but just seeing how you do the details, the hair, the face, everything pushes
It's
me
incredible.
in my embroidery to see what more I can do. And the piece that I did when Trump was at the, supposedly he was offering his I don't even know what you would call it, because I never believe it, but he was standing behind the casket when it was on the steps. And the protesters were standing behind the gate, the fencing, and they were shouting vote him out and honor her last wish.
Yeah.
I was able to get more three-dimensional on that piece and do a little more with the details. And
Wonderful.
you two ladies inspire me so much with your pieces to keep doing more.
What you did was beautiful.
It
And
is.
I'm constantly learning more about embroidery. I go on YouTube and I find out how to make different stitches and things, and that gives me ideas.
Isn't that a wonderful source?
It is. You can learn anything. It's just fantastic.
I have to say that I'm kind of amazed at how impactful this work is. And when I describe it to people, I say, well, we embroider things on vintage linen. We write words on vintage linen. And to me, a big part of this is the words. It's the words that we write on the linen, that we write, and it's also the words that we have written about our pieces. And I'm so glad that you put together the book that has the pieces and the words together. So I think that's very important. But when I just tell people, we're embroidering on vintage linen, it doesn't sound like it would be that much. And I think the same thing was true when I think about, for example, the Vietnam War Memorial. We put up the names of people on stone. And yet when you go to visit that, it is very impactful. And so I think this is kind of a similar
It's
thing,
more than
that it is
Absolutely.
more than just describing it. The
Yeah.
impact of it is greater than just the description of what it is.
Absolutely.
I think that is also when we saw the show at Beacon and seeing video of the show at Lingua Franca, just the volume of pieces really makes the statement too, just how much there is. I've had only a couple trolls come in and yell at me about the show. And one man said, all I see here is hate. And I said, well, these are Donald Trump's tweets.
Mm-hmm.
And he really didn't know what to say. And he sort of looked at them and he was very confused. But it is an overwhelming picture of sort of where we've been in the last 3 years and 11 months, and just where we are now.
And I think, Margaret, people ask me about trolls all the time, and that sort of response, I don't consider trolling, actually. I consider that a very honest and very constructive comment in terms of, and I think often it's met as criticism. So, you're just, people say, you're giving him more energy, or you're perpetuating something. The idea that you are creating more hate. And I think you're creating less. You can't deny that the source is what the source is. That's why we're doing this. If I were stitching Obama quotes, none of you would have joined me. I've been at shows and people say, I love Barack Obama, and I don't really remember anything he said. And it would just somehow be kind of cute. And I think we can do pieces on Ruth Bader Ginsburg and John Lewis and so many other people because it's in the context of this other language. And so I think it's sort of it's an and, not a but. These are words of hate. There is hate. We cannot, Trump says the things that were silent before. And just as, Black Lives Matter say things that were silent before, and the Me Too movement says things that were silent before. It is very important when the only record of this presidency will eventually be his Twitter feed, that we have an alternative. And that's because there are people who support him. He was,
Yeah.
He's president. That's all I can, my answer to that always is, he's president.
No, and there are people who still
These are
support
his words, and these are his words.
Yeah.
These are his, yes.
But it
And
almost
I think
feels like taking the words back, like putting them in a different format, really, I think, transforms them.
Yeah, we can handle it. We're not going to stop. We're not down. We're not. We're going to be creative when things are really difficult or sad. This is the point, and
It's
who could have imagined?
therapeutic. It's very therapeutic for me.
Yeah.
Involved.
Yeah, you take back some of the energy. It's giving him less, I think.
Yeah.
Well, and I like your comment, Diana, about it was on a video that was posted about people will stop and look and read it if it's hand stitched. If it's created in this slow way, people will read it. And it puts it out there for what it is.
Absolutely. Yeah.
We also talked with Peggy about the Noble Pigs Award. And she told us that Diana had sort of challenged you all to a piece. Did you all do that?
I did not. I can't remember. I was working on something else at the time, and I thought, well, that's a good idea, but it just didn't strike me. So I'm sorry.
No, I just was wondering.
It's there's the prize.
Yes. I thought Peggy's piece was absolutely brilliant and just a perfect representation. And a merging of the two prizes, it was just spot on perfect.
And yet again today at a rally, I heard a clip on the TV that he was bragging. This was in Michigan, where you know how he puts down the governor so much. That he was bragging to this group that years ago he had gotten the Man of the Year award in Michigan. And I looked it up. No, it never happened.
Oh, you mean he lied about something? Oh,
No, I know that's hard to imagine. He apparently spoke at some, I don't know, some group, but the person from that group was quoted in an article later on saying, "We never have and we never will give Man of the Year awards." So I don't know where that came from, but no.
His battle brain. So have you all been activists before this project?
No.
yeah.
I
I got involved a little bit on local politics because my daughter kind of pulled me along. We have our district congressman, Harley Ruda, replaced Dana Rohrabacher, who I'm sure everyone has heard of, who was our congressman for 30 years and just a horrible, horrible man. And so he turned our very Republican county into having a wonderful Democratic congressman. And so I kind of got involved. I never got to do phone banking because I wasn't real comfy with that, but I did other things. I hosted when people were going out in the neighborhood. We were like their starting place. I've done hundreds of postcards. And the postcards I've done not only for local, but also for a group called Moms Rising that does national get out the vote kinds of things. So, but this was my first bigger scale thing. And honestly, I never felt before through all the presidents of my life that I had every morning to wake up and say, turn to my husband, did you look at the newspaper? What did he do this morning? It's like, I'm tired of that. It's exhausting.
Yes.
I started a little bit when the Sandy Hook massacre happened at the elementary school. That really, really struck me in the heart. And I started doing a little bit of work with gun control groups. I made a quilt that I would like to sometime donate to a gun control group. And so I did do a little bit of artwork with that. I've done phone calls, I've done some postcard writing, but I feel like this is activism coming to me. I mean, I can do it on my own terms, and my own terms are stitching it. So that's great.
Diana, do you want to talk about projects you've done before this in terms of activism and art?
I've always, my parents left the States in 1970 and moved to Canada. So I grew up with a sense of activism and protest, and grew up going to marches, and continued in college with Take Back the Night marches, and have always done, had something going. But this is very different, and this is sort of it's a really different kind of activism, and above and beyond anything else that I've done. But I also think that the activism of this project has not been fully realized yet, because I don't think we know what's going to happen in a week, and what happens in a week tells us a lot about what we've been doing and who we are. And then what's the real activism, social justice piece of this project? How will it be used in a different way? And it's been a process of just collecting the pieces. It's been about the numbers for a long time, because this is a window and there's so much need. We're all waking up in the morning and wondering what was said, and my only concern has been that we won't capture it all. So I would say that the activism piece of Tiny Pricks, and so therefore, my activism process has not been realized yet, and it will be when we see all of these pieces together, when we see it in a performative way, in the way that the AIDS quilt went to the Washington Mall, or what is it that this project will do for the future. And that's the real, so this is, I consider this sort of not activism light, but it is part of what Beth said, which is you do it on your own terms in your own interior world, you share it. Instagram is about activism in a way, but there's another piece of it all that I think we'll all find, this project will find its way to that.
I think that it has something to do with movement building as well, where you have gathered a collective of people who are thinking and acting in ways that they have not done before. And, maybe this horrifying presidency has just frayed everyone's last nerve. But I'm wondering for all of you, and we don't know what's going to happen in a week, how do we go on? What do we make now?
Peggy, you last question. You're gonna tell us.
I don't know. I hope I can get a good night's sleep someday again. I don't know. I think we have to see what happens. I mean, I don't think I'll ever stop making art, and I'll ever stop expressing myself some way or another. But yeah, I think it just depends on what's needed, or what's called for, or what project happens, or if we continue to do things for this project. It's I'm available. That's all I can tell you. I'm available, and I love the process. I love doing it. It's just very important to me. So yeah, I think we'll just see what's needed, what needs to be done. Yeah.
Well, I think that there's lots of opportunity. I was thinking about, I've been thinking about what happens in after the election. I mean, lots of we could do pieces about racial injustice. We could do pieces about the environment. We could do women's rights. We could do gun control. There's lots of issues that we could move forward with and work with. And I think in the same media, I think it would work with this very much so. And I've been kind of in a funk this week with the Supreme Court, and I have just to decide, just to keep moving forward and keep doing what I do, and just keep moving forward in the best way that I can. So we'll see what happens.
There are two pieces here. There's the collection, and then there's the platform. And the platform is adaptable. The platform exists. It's people. And the collection is a tangible collection. So I think that different things happen to those two different things. Biden is not an answer to many of the things that this project struggles with. Trump is a person, but there's a lot of work to do. And I think that this project has developed the habit of this kind of work. And when you have people like Peggy, Carol, and Beth, and many others who have made so many pieces, they have a practice in place that when something is happening, there's a it's the spark, and that activism can start again. And I think that there are ways that everyone, we can take this to the next level, but at the same time, nothing's going to, things are going to continue, and they're going to be very difficult things if Biden is president as well. It doesn't resolve anything. It just switches the landscape. But now we know a lot, and we know there are a lot of things that have not been resolved, and we will need to do that work.
And with the Supreme Court the way it is now, there will be a lot of ongoing things that are coming up with that will be touching everyone's lives, and will be
hopefully. The risk is that Trump is such a kind of, he's so good at what he does that my real concern is that issues like, Syrian refugees, the court, things that are not getting attention right now because Trump takes up so much of it. There's going to be a larger stage for other really important things that are happening. And the question is, can we keep people focused on these things? Can this medium, instead of taking somebody who has the largest bullhorn in the world, can we take small things and amplify them and say, this is something that's happening in some other part of the world. It's not something we just woke up and, heard from Twitter. And can the project work in this other way as well?
Like what's going on in Nigeria right now.
Yes.
I just read about this week. I hadn't seen anything really much in the paper. So, yeah.
Diana, what is your dream, your plan for the collection?
Well, I'd like it to be exhibited together, and that hasn't been possible. I would like it to have the sort of scaffolding that it so richly deserves, which is, in other words, I bootstrap it all myself. So I need to start to spend some time with my family again and have something of a normal life again. And luckily I've had so many people like you and Heather, and so many people who have made it their own and taken it on. So I'm not complaining, but it is time for a shift for me personally. But I would love to have an exhibit, and I'd love to have a book, and I would love for it to be preserved, and also to be, but in a way that's accessible. I don't want it to end up in boxes in the bottom, in the basement of the Smithsonian. I mean, not that that's not a wonderful place, but I think it needs to be seen, and it needs to be alive. And I think it needs to sort of continue in some way. I don't know what it is yet, but mostly at some point as sort of the caretaker of this project, I want it to be well taken care of, well beyond the care that I've given it, so that it can be easily exhibited and travel and accessible. It's becoming more and more difficult to see it in person, not just because of the pandemic, but because, this is a time of anxiety, and there are places that won't exist in a year from now. And we need to sort of try to find a way for this to become accessible so that people can see it in person, which is really where the experience of it is, when you can see it in person. So those are my goals.
Because the numbers are so vast, do you imagine it all being shown together at once? Really?
Yeah. Of course, it belongs together, doesn't it?
Yeah.
You have a show, whether you have a show of 100 pieces or 1,000, people walk in and they're struck by it because it is amazing.
Yes.
But there's going to be something that happens in a space that's large enough to have every single piece, where it's a really different experience, and it is bringing all these people together. Yes. And for people making so many different pieces, it's bringing them together with the different times at which they made them, because each of these participants has a chronology within the project. This is when I felt this. This is when I made this piece. This is what I was thinking. And it connects to their personal lives too. This is what happened. This is when the pandemic hit. This is where I was when. And you only get that "this is where I was when" experience of seeing these quotes, I think, when you see them all, when you see the scope of the time that we've lived in. I think it's necessary to see all of them together somewhere.
Well, for us, just receiving all this work, where often attached or in an email is the story behind the piece. Is that something to include in some form in terms of showing the work, or in the book that comes out of this?
I think that that's really up to the participants. I'm a pretty private person, actually, and I have 4 children, and I sort of believe in their privacy, even in the age of social media. So I think I always feel that it's whatever participants want to share. In terms of a publication, you know, the real questions will come down to every single piece being included, or do you curate? I mean, the question always is about curating. And with this project, I think of it as a mural. So even though these are very individual pieces made by very individual artists, I think of them as fitting together in that way. And then I feel that the information beyond the piece that's shared is really up to the participants. And I would love for that to be, for example, there to be a digital library, and each of, you know, Beth, Carol, and Peggy can all share what they want to share, because some people are not able to share things. There was a mother whose daughter had been sexually assaulted, and they were in the middle of a legal action, and they couldn't mention names or place. I mean, there are a lot of different stories that can't be told and shared, and this piece stands in for that story. So that's how I viewed it. And it's been really, I think it's up to the participants ultimately. This is enough of a generous, enough of an act to ask people to make something and gift it to a community, that beyond that, what they share is really up to them.
But some of the sharing that has been posted on Instagram because they wanted to has been so touching. One in particular I remember was an anonymous one who told about working on the piece in secret so that the spouse didn't know, because they were very polar opposite views politically. But the drive to complete it, and it was a wonderful piece, and that really touched me in a different way from a lot of the other stories that were shared.
And there's a really, just a full disclosure, there's a really, Instagram is not meant for this to be used in the way I'm using it, honestly. I mean, you're only supposed to post twice a day. And there's no way for me either to tell everyone's story in a post. Sometimes when I get a lot of pieces in, I can post up to 30 a day in a series of 10. If I post more than one photo at a time, my apps don't automatically switch it to Twitter and Facebook in the same way, or it does to Facebook, but not Twitter. And so there are lots of considerations, and also keeping in mind, the work, the labor, the sort of posting, the publishing, if you will. So Instagram is not a perfect medium, as it turns out in this way. I think all of you probably read the comments. You'd be amazed by how many people like pieces that they don't actually read the whole piece of art even, right? There's a really, of the 69,000 people following this project, some are just hitting like in a couple of seconds. So it'll be interesting to see if there's a way to, maybe a website where you could go in and click on a piece and read about that person's story in a way that they want to tell it, not me interviewing them, but them telling the information that they want to tell and share. And then for some people, it's been intimidating just enough to make a piece, much less ask them to write something about it. They're like, no, too much. So it's been interesting. And to be honest, I've just been figuring it out as I'm going along, because I haven't done this before either.
You've done an amazing job in difficult times, and the amount of hours you must have spent on just helping this project go forward, and just
there's a lot of ironing,
all this work. And you need staff. I think we all need staff.
Don't tell my family. I have a lot of family support. I have a tremendous amount of support. I'm able to do this work right now. So it's a lot of work, but it is also not without a lot of help.
Yeah.
I couldn't do it on my own.
But those sort of taking it to another place with maybe a digital archive or a book, you know, some sort of archival project, it seems like you need more than, I mean, you're already doing so much that there needs to be to find you help.
Yeah, it will get that. We'll get there.
Well, I don't know if there are questions that you each would like to ask of each other, or just any other comments you have aside from telling everyone to vote if you haven't already. It's a very sort of queasy making time right now, just days before this election, and I know we're all
Stressful. My husband added the word stressful. Yes.
yes,
Yeah.
yes,
Very much so. Very much so.
and probably as artists, knowing that we're probably more introverted than most, just making those calls and sending out those postcards that I'm sure you all have done. How have you felt about that? You can still be in your house and do those things.
Yeah. Yeah. That was comfortable for me. I mean, writer's cramp, but at least I felt, you know, that because my local groups that I've been helping, they feel that the door knocking and the postcards and the phone calls, actually, they seem to feel there's proof that there's a good result from those.
Good.
Yeah.
So
I actually got a postcard. I was
oh,
one of my neighbors, and she just signed it. I don't know who she was, but it was, you know, go out and vote. And I said, look, I got one. So,
And what
Have
about
you
you,
all
Peggy?
voted?
I have voted. Yes.
You voted.
Oh, yeah, I voted.
I have as well.
Good job.
The vote by mail, but we didn't mail it back. We took it to a drop box.
Well, we did vote by mail, but we could track it, so we know that it was received.
Yeah.
As soon as we could, we sent it in. So we
I
have
guess
voted.
my question, if I had a question for the 3 or 4 of you, is do you have a piece in mind for election night? Do you have a piece A and a piece B?
I haven't thought that far ahead. Now that just gave me butterflies in my stomach.
I know. Oh my God.
I have been thinking back to election night 2016, and
Oh,
I was all ready to celebrate with my neighbor, first woman president. You know, let's open a bottle of wine and celebrate. And the next morning, I was doing water aerobics, and I was in water aerobics, and there was just this silence across the whole pool. It was absolutely stunned. So
Yeah.
I think a lot of people are thinking back to that night and morning. And
It was bad.
Do you have an idea of how you'll respond depending on which way the election goes?
well, that just made me flash on if Trump loses, I can just see whatever the piece is going to be, it will just say in big cursive, it was rigged.
perfect.
Yes, even if he loses, you know, my husband and I keep talking about what more damage can he do just out of his vicious, vengeful mind between election day and inauguration day, even if he loses.
Oh, especially if he loses. Oh,
Yes.
horrible thoughts.
So I think there'll still be lots to embroider, unfortunately, whichever way.
And another question that I think about a fair amount is all these whistleblowers are going to come forward, and people who have been key parts of this administration are going to write a book, or they're going to be on Trump TV, or they're going to do something. And the question will be whether or not it's important to include those pieces and those words so that we understand what happens, or, you know, outcome of E. Jean Carroll's lawsuit against Trump, because a lot of these threads, a lot of these pieces are open questions. They're not,
Right.
they're not ended. They're not things, you know, that have any sort of resolution. They're all open, you know, wounds and open issues. So will it feel necessary to do follow-up pieces to pieces that you've done where you think this is, you know,
Yeah.
pages parents who can't find? I mean, how are these stories going to continue to be told and drawing attention to these issues? So
I think we will be feeling the fallout for a long time.
Yeah.
And with the Supreme Court the way it is, the damage is going to be ongoing, and we have to follow the lead of.
Yeah.
I'm feeling this fun.
Diana, you can't quit anytime soon. We still need.
No, we're not quitting, and I'm so grateful to see all of you.
Yeah, thank you.
Not quitting. It gives me hope too.
Well, I sometimes think, you know, when I post this stuff, I post it on my Facebook page and I post it on Instagram. And am I preaching to the choir? Am I in an echo chamber that I'm just preaching to the choir? But then I start reading the comments, and especially on the Instagram, and people say things like, thank you. This is perfect. This lifts me up. Thank you. This keeps me going. And I think that's very important, that the choir does need a little preaching to once in a while, and a little boost up. So I think the work is important and needs to continue.
And especially if you live in areas that are not as many people that are like-minded, but it's good to know that they're out there.
Yeah.
Absolutely right. Absolutely.
I think you don't know how it's impacting people and who it's impacting, and that's part of the unknown part of the process. It's an act of faith, you know, to assume that if you sing, someone will listen. But there are a lot of people who don't say anything and who are really helped by the work that you do, and you just don't know it. And that's just part of the process of that surrender to the sort of unknown.
But I think that's also the genius of your outreach, and you're creating such a large audience, Diana, where it is reaching people. I mean, I know in Rhode Island, we're in a nice little blue bubble. Mm-hmm. If somebody votes for Trump, it doesn't really matter here, you know, and we just don't encounter people who are so opposite us, and we're not fighting that fight all the time. But you're reaching all over the world with this.
Yeah.
And I think that's what matters too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I know you have to go, but I'm so glad you could. I'm so glad you could join.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Diana.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
And I hope we can all see each other, you know, in the flesh someday.
Yes.
We will at that gigantic exhibit that there's going to be.
We definitely will. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Margaret.
Thank you.
Bye. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.